You guys ever wonder what happened to Peter Griffin in the later seasons of Family Guy? Welcome back to the Cartoon Palooza, where eventually I talk about news and animation, trends in the industry. I like doing reviews on Saturdays, and I like doing these sort of free talking, no script, loose thoughts, commentary on things going on in the industry, as well as just general editorials. And something about this topic seemed less appropriate for a Cartoon Palooza review and more or less prone to doing this type of video. If you like this type of content, feel free to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification to get the video. That helps me a lot. Helps you get more content on the channel. So what got me thinking about this is just generally how Family Guy seemed to tank over the years. I mean, I feel like there's no question to it. It's been on TV. It's got 24 seasons at this point. But there was a point where Family Guy pretty much ruled the world. At the point when it was canceled and then revived on Adult Swim and then brought back to Fox, that to me was like a period when a lot of people could not stop talking about Family Guy. That was where you got to see some interesting directions that the characters took, specifically Peter Griffin. And early on, when the show first started, I was always invested into Peter Griffin. I love lovable Lois. Homer Simpson's one of my favorite animated characters on TV. I love a character that's just silly, good intentions, but just too stupid for their own good, that they make some stupid decisions. It's kind of like watching Adam McKay movies, like Step Brothers. Right now I'm rewatching Parks and Recreations, and Chris Pratt's character, Chris Pine, oh my God, plays Andy, is that type of character. And it got me thinking about Peter Griffin, who I feel like kind of embodied that for a while. But then I saw a meme online, I'm going to pull it up here, where they brought up some really good points. So they called the Chad seasons Peter season 1 and 3, where they show that he has expressive characteristics, a little bit more animation, smiles at simple delights, makes you feel relaxed and nostalgic, and says freaking sweet, holy crap. Syndicated onto Adult Swim after cancellation and was loved so much that they got the show revived. And then that led to like seasons 4 and 7, where they obviously had a bigger budget and they obviously noticed that they could get away with a little bit more on Adult Swim. I think this is kind of where that, flanderization started with the character, where he started to get a little bit more aggressive with his humor. But I would argue, is still very similar to seasons 1 and 3. Bigger budget, getting away with more things, but eventually, like for example, it was silly at first when you have him making fun of Meg being, the dumpster child of the family, and is starting to get more aggressive with hating people and fighting. There was a lot, I would say, there's like outside of the chicken fight in the first season, you get a lot more violence out of this season. But the problem is that, like, I would say once it started to go back to Fox after it started back on Adult Swim, this is where this, and as the meme shows, seasons 8 to 18 Peter is mostly animated with choppy 2D vector animation. So they kind of lose that traditional frame by frame animation that was more relevant in seasons 1 through 3 than say 4 and 7. You still kind of had that type of animation in seasons 4 and 7, but there's like more idle animations, like his eyes just looking soulless, which is such a good embodiment of that. And it's just downright rude to his family, and I think that's what bothered people the most, because then it got me doing a little bit of an experiment. I figured, yeah, this meme says 8 to 18, and then 19 is where they kind of just get a little bit further with that once they got bought out by Disney. A little bit more nerded in a sense too, but never going back to that original Peter Griffin. And it got me wanting to watch a new season and compare it to season 3, when this is when people considered the peak era of Peter Griffin. So I'm going to pull it up here. The episode I watched was called Let the Goodtimes Walk. So this is not a Peter-centric episode, it's a Joe-centric episode. But Peter is fairly relevant in it. And it starts off in a very typical way. They, go to a school that's selling things. They make a joke about the arts, falling apart, not really funny. But right off the bat, he's already rude to Lois. And that to me is already like a red flag because generally speaking, he loved Lois so much in those original seasons. Like he would do things that are rude, and as we'll talk about when we talk about the earlier episode. But like right off the bat, he's like, talking about, just talking about how rude or how stupid Lois is, just putting her down. And then he gets a saxophone and he's playing the saxophone, annoying people, disregard for other people around him. But this is kind of typical of, the earlier Peter Griffin anyways. Like he's just doing shenanigans, but there's more of an emphasis on him just not giving a crap. But I also think where it also leans into as well is the fact that like there's more self-awareness that they're on a TV show. And you kind of get vibes of that, not so much in like other episodes that you see. Eventually, it's bothering Joe. He can't sleep, so then Quagmire gives him sleeping pills that are really strong, and then somehow, some way, it makes him walk. All right. At that point, when he's starting to sleepwalk, literally sleepwalk, he becomes a new character. And he's more, laid back as opposed to the original Joe, which then I would even argue he kind of flanderized in the later seasons as well too. But for purposes, we're talking about Peter. And this is where you start noticing those flaws that I was mentioning earlier. He all of a sudden has no problem with drugging Joe so that he can just start walking and be a cool person. And it only becomes a factor to him that he needs to stop this when eventually it affects him personally. He becomes the new Joe. So it isn't even like a moral sort of revelation. And these sort of things can be easily written into the shows, but they just don't care. They're renewed. It's like a teacher on tenure. They just don't care. And that, to me, kind of brought the episode down. Not the worst episode I've ever seen, but just straight up mediocre. But it's definitely part of what people can't stand about Family Guy right now. Because then I went back and, another thing about that episode too, it totally ripped off an earlier season when Joe does start walking, and they eventually just do the same thing to get him to walk again. But at least that episode had a little bit more heart. But let's go to season 3 and the episode Death Lives. By the way, whatever happened to Death not showing up on the show regularly? I always loved those type of episodes where he showed up more regularly. So he avoids his anniversary and sends Lois on this somewhat, elaborate scheme just to get her to go grocery shopping, where he eventually finds out that he just goes out to play golf. And he comes to a close to death experience. Death comes down to tell him that, Lois is going to be leaving you. And he's like, well, that's not possible. So he has flashbacks to meeting Lois, going on dates with Lois. And yeah, Peter's still aggressive in a lot of ways. Like he's still just, inconsiderate, especially when it comes to like him having Lois go on this thing while he intentionally just plays golf on their anniversary. But he feels bad. And you could kind of see that in this episode too. Like the whole point of having a show called Family Guy is to show that you have a family guy. Like at this point where the show is gone, and there's evidence in this show as well, in this episode as well too, because it's got a fairly good, it's got funny moments in this well too, where, their Peter Frampton song comes up when a guy blows up in a truck. I wish I could show a clip of it, but I'm trying not to get demonetized when I show this. And those type of moments I feel like show just how far Family Guy has gone today, where eventually all that hearth and warmth that came from the show earlier on is just not present anymore. And I don't think this is anything that really matters to them. Like I said before, they are at a point where Family Guy is very successful. They're going to be getting a new spin-off show with Stewie. And there's no evidence that it's going to be going away. I still love Seth MacFarlane. I still think he's a great animator, filmmaker, voice actor, and actor. Like, everything he tries to do, he always puts his effort in. And it's very evident that Seth MacFarlane, once he started to detach himself more away from Family Guy, that's when everything seemed to get more into this aggressive humor where a lot of people were just assuming, oh, Seth would probably have done that. And it's like, I don't think so. So, I mean, here's what I gotta say about it. Yeah, we don't have to make him a responsible character. Like, even earlier on in the season, he, made some goof ups. He doesn't need to stop being offensive. Like, that offensive humor and that gross out humor was still evident in the earlier seasons. But just let him be a little bit more sincere. Show a little bit more love to his family. Let him make mistakes, coming from human insecurities where, it's not going to make the absurdity stronger. It makes the absurdity stronger, but it doesn't make it weaker. So, personally, the best version of Peter Griffin was never the good husband or a responsible father or an intelligent man. Just a flawed guy who still wanted to be those things. That's what made him a family guy, and I feel like that's something that a lot of people are kind of missing with this new, half-butted, lazy, psychotic Peter Parker. Just imagine what that would be like. But hey, maybe you guys have the counter argument. You can put the counter argument in the comments below if you disagree with that. And feel free to subscribe. Like I said, be great if you like this video to just click that like button and hit that notifications once you subscribe. And with that, I'm gonna call it a day and take care.